The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Wednesday, the 25th of February, 2026. We're live here at CHD TV and we have a fantastic show for you today. Stay tuned, though. Dawn is coming on with Advocacy Lifeline straight after this interview, and she's going to be talking about Florida's medical freedom and progress, exposing vaccine lies. You definitely don't want to miss that with the amazing Susan Sweetin. But for now, we're going to be talking about dental implants, the untold risks, and we're going to be bringing back Heidi Bond. Some of you may remember she was on before. And the great honour of introducing to you, if you have not met him already, Dr. Stuart Nunnally, who is my favourite dentist in the whole world. And I can say he literally, thank you, saved my life with the treatment that he gave me. So I get emotional when I speak about it because you really did. So thank you. And not just me, a great many other people as well. So we're so grateful to you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Polly.
All right. Well, Heidi, why don't we start with you and you remind people of your story? Because when you came on, you were not in a good way.
Exactly. Yeah. When I came on last time, I was pleading, to the world, basically. I needed somebody to remove my dental implant. The oral surgeon who placed it refused to take it out because he said he didn't see any active infection in it. And for the past 7 years, I've been having autoimmune issues, autoimmune type symptoms, pin and needle sensation throughout my body, swelling on the right side of my throat, pus, swelling of the gum tissue at the implant site, teeth aching, top of the roof of my mouth aching, really swollen. After, I came on, to your show, I just did a deep dive and I found Dr. Nunnally. And it was a godsend. I thank God for him. I truly believe, he saved my life. He not only people travel, from around the world, 64 different countries to see Dr. Nunnally. He's absolutely one of a kind. What was happening with me and other people, who have dental implants, the tooth, right, has the gum structure that holds on tight, to a natural tooth. The implant, the gums can't attach real tight to that implant. So the Wi-Fi heats up that implant and it's the perfect breeding ground for bacteria. And I was really blessed, to have found him because not only did he remove it, but he removed it right. He removed the implant. He took my own blood, spun it, created platelets, packed it up there. Had me on vitamin C IV, and he cleaned the area with ozone, which is extremely important because you have to get rid of all the bacteria. And I could have, Dr. Ongley explain a little bit more about, my case and the bacteria that we found because the implant was sent to an independent lab, and what was found should shock the nation to its core.
Thank you, Heidi. Well, Dr. Nunnally, when you first saw Heidi's mouth, and all the backstory of it, what did you think? Is this something you see a lot of, or is it a rare occurrence?
No, it's something I do see a lot of. And primarily over the last many years, at least 4 or 5 decades, titanium implants have been used as a substitute for missing teeth. And I'll have to say that most times people seem to tolerate titanium implants quite well. There comes a point, though, I think sometimes we have these tipping points in our lives, maybe from other toxicities or just environmental factors, where we don't handle a foreign body well. And it's interesting in that most people don't know that when over the years, when I've removed implants, especially titanium implants, I've submitted many of those for a DNA bacterial report, and I've never had one that didn't come back with quite an impressive milieu of bacteria on the implant. And it has to do with the fact that the oral environment is tough on implants. I don't think it's not so that way. And when you have, for example, an implanted titanium hip or an implanted titanium shoulder that's not exposed to the oral environment on a 24/7 basis. But there's so many changes in the oral environment in terms of temperature differences and in terms of acidity and that can cause corrosion to the implant surface and can serve as a very nice incubator for bacteria. So in Heidi's case, I being in the practice that we're in here, Polly, I see this quite frequently. Patients who say, we can't find what the reason is for the demise in our health, and no one wants to acknowledge that maybe it's an implant, especially one that looks like it was placed as nicely as Heidi's. But I've found over the years that many times when these are removed, patients do better, if not extremely better. So that's what we found in her case. And her particular implant removal was ideal in that I was able to remove it without disturbing any of the surrounding tissue. So often when we remove these, we have to disturb the surrounding tissue just to get it out. But in her case, with some force, we were just literally able to unscrew the implant so that nothing touched this implant other than a pair of sterile forceps. And then they went immediately into a sterile test tube. So what we got here was an absolute true reading.
And you have those readings now. Can we put those up on screen, please? Maybe you could explain to us what they mean.
Okay, well, we all have an impressive microbiome in our mouth, just as we do in our gut. And most of these bacteria that you see on this report that was given, it's a DNA report that was given for Heidi. Most of these are microbes that you find every day in the mouth. The problem is when they get into an area where they can grow without being challenged, as they can in an area around an implant, they can overgrow. In other words, the microbiome becomes skewed in a way that it can have an impact on your health. Now, all of these microbiomes, all of these microbes, for the most part, are fairly innocuous unless they are skewed in the direction where they overgrow. And then they can definitely have an impact on our health. Not only the fact that they can be quite potent, but the toxins that they produce can also be a real challenge for us. So I think in Heidi's case, this was an impressive list of fairly routine microbes, but you can tell those that are in the red are in areas that this laboratory, which is an independent DNA testing laboratory, would consider putting her at risk.
So, Heidi, how do you feel now?
I feel a lot better. I literally feel like Dr. Nunnally saved my life. If this would have, gone any longer, I think 5-10 years max, I probably wouldn't be here. I thank God that I found him.
And Heidi, what do you recommend for people listening now that are suffering like you were? Because you were actually feeling like you were going to die when you were last on. You were really, really sick.
Yeah. I didn't feel good at all. I would have them reach out to Dr. Nunnally. Like he saved my life.
And what an experience it is going to, can we put that picture up of Heidi outside your clinic or whatever you call the dentist place? Because people who have not been, when you go in there, it is, you can feel Jesus the minute you walk in. There's Jesus everywhere, which for me is perfect. And I always joke that it's better than going to a spa. I mean, I love the treatment you get there. The staff are so kind. It really is just that you've built somewhere so beautiful, Dr. Nunnally. And I know I'm speaking on behalf of so many people when I say thank you for saving
Well,
so many of our lives, seriously.
that's so kind of you. I wanted to say one other thing that's rarely acknowledged in Western medicine and dentistry, and that is that we have these beautiful energetic channels that run through us. They're just flows of energy that God put in us, and they go through every organ, every cell in our body. And the teeth, believe it or not, are a major part of that. And these are very well known in the eastern part of the world and by acupuncturists and acupressurists. They know that when you have a bad tooth, a dead tooth, or even a titanium implant, it blocks that flow of energy. So it's quite possible that not only, Heidi, that you're feeling much better because you don't have this same bacterial load, but now you don't have the interruption in this electrical activity that goes through those teeth to various organs. So I think in your case, this is not only a bacterial issue, but it's an electrochemical issue. And that's a powerful, powerful mechanism to help restore health. In fact, again, a lot of the world, not necessarily in the Western medical world, but a lot of the world would say that's even more important than the bacterial infections themselves.
So we do have a lot of questions for you, Dr. Nunnally. And one of the questions that's come in is if root canals are so bad, which we haven't talked about, but please everybody go and see Root Cause if you can find it. It gets taken down faster than Vax a movie. They don't want you to see it. But if root canals are so bad and implants are problematic, then what do you do if you have a bad tooth?
That's the great question, because no one wants to lose a tooth. Fortunately, today in dentistry, there are many ways to replace teeth. Sometimes they're not, and quite, they're never as good as what God put there in the first place, the replacements. But I think, quite frankly, that in a healthy patient, a zirconia implant rather than titanium can be a solution. They integrate into the bone, in my opinion, far better than titanium. And some people, here, let me just tell you, over the years, I've removed many, many titanium implants just because of issues like Heidi has spoken of. But over the years, I've only probably removed less than 20 zirconia implants. It was usually because of something didn't heal correctly, or maybe the implant broke. Most of that has been resolved over the years. So I would say that in my experience, and I think the literature is beginning to bear this out now, that zirconia implants are a great alternative solution. And then, of course, with modern dentistry, we can make little bridges, we can make removable bridges, all kinds of ways to replace the teeth, both for aesthetics and function. But nothing's as good as what we had initially.
But Dr. Nunnally, do you even recommend? It's almost like saying, is it not? Well, if you're going to take a vaccine, then none of them are safe and effective, but maybe you can get away with this one. Isn't it all of it bad? Should we really not have them? Because it's a foreign object in our body, right?
It is a foreign object. Obviously, some are far more biocompatible than others. And the issue, I think, Paula, you raised the question that I deal with almost every minute in my practice, every day. And that is, what can we do to help you function and chew and yet not compromise your immune system? And so it's a decision that the patient and a good holistic dentist has to make. And sometimes you have someone, who's robustly healthy, and they say, I absolutely will not tolerate something removable in my mouth to replace a tooth. And so occasionally we make the decision to, yes, use a zirconia implant.
So another question coming is, what do we do if we already have root canals and implants? So, and they're sitting and watching this thinking, I don't want this.
Well, I think it's important that the patient really be convicted that, because if they have these removed, quite frankly, it's never as easy as placing the implant. Removing them most times and removing infected root canal teeth leaves the patient with a lesser ability to chew. And sometimes it's an aesthetic issue. Those things can be overcome, but it's typically a somewhat expensive process, and it's a surgical process. And it's a process that I personally would undergo if I had a root canal treated tooth. I have a daughter that's close to Heidi's age, and I would remove a root canal treated tooth on her in a heartbeat, because I know that a root canal treated tooth still is infected, regardless of how well the root canal was done. And it produces, the bacteria in there continue to produce toxins that can be a challenge to the systemic health.
Okay, we more questions are coming in. But I think one thing that a lot of parents want to know is this question: how do they prevent? I will tell you this, a lot of parents now in our movement are as afraid of dentists as they are of pediatricians because of the fluoride that's wiped around the mouth and the constant, we're going to take this tooth out, we're going to do, all these treatments. So what do you recommend to these young families who've got little children?
I would really recommend trying to find a holistically oriented dentist, because most of those that I know of in the realm in which I work would not paint their teeth with fluoride. The issue with fluoride is, of course, interestingly enough, painted on, it does in some ways help protect against decay. But now you have fluoride disseminated throughout the body, and every cell in your child's body is using iodine, and fluoride is going to outcompete for iodine. And now you have a real challenge to their systemic health, especially to their thyroid. So I would encourage parents to stay away from fluoride, particularly fluoride supplements. Anything used systemically, I would absolutely avoid. And I would try to see a holistic dentist who has other methods in his tool chest for preventing decay other than using fluoride.
And the other question is it genetic if you have bad teeth?
It can have a genetic component, but for the most part, the genetic component, if you're predisposed to decay or periodontal disease, most of that can be overcome by proper nutrition and all those other things that we consider as systemically healthy things to do.
And someone in the chat asking, what about ozone root canal? Is there such a thing?
Oh, yes. And I think if you're having a root canal, ozone in the root canal can be very, very helpful, but here's what we know long term is that does not sterilize the canal long term. And so if you have, for example, unless you're going to go in ever so often and have it reozonated, and how do you know that you have not let the bacteria in there regrow, and that's beginning to compromise your health before you reozonate it? It becomes a real issue, I think. So if a root canal specialist is using ozone, I applaud him. That's a great step in the right direction. The issue is you still cannot you can't keep that root canal system sterile.
And another thing is, Heidi, I think you mentioned that you did not have any pain in your teeth. So how do people know if they've got problems or that bacteria there and they're not feeling any pain? I know when I came to you, I was all swollen and my goiter was out and everything was a nightmare. But some people don't have any symptoms.
No,
Exactly.
and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Heidi, but I'll just quickly say many disease processes are not painful. In fact, most cancers are not painful, at least until end stage. Periodontal disease is rarely ever painful until it gets toward the end of almost eliminating a tooth due to its progression. So it's a bad it's a bad prerequisite to say that I have to have pain before this is an issue.
So Heidi, thank you, Dr. Nunnally. Heidi, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, 100% correct, because I had Dr. Nunnally removed the dental implant and the root canal next to that dental implant. And I had no pain in that root canal tooth. And if you can put up the picture real quick, Dr. Nunnally can explain what he saw, and you could clearly see it on the root canal tooth that was pulled. The infection, which we would have never known. Do you want to speak on that a little?
Well, I've submitted probably in the thousands now of root canal treated teeth and most of them are asymptomatic. In other words, patients had no pain. But I've submitted hundreds and thousands for these DNA analyses, and they always come. Then not a one is sterile. You don't get a sterile root canal treated tooth, because when the dentist does the root canal, even if it's done in a beautiful way, there's still there can be up to several miles of little microscopic tubules in the tooth, much like honeycomb, that are still filled with bacteria. So, and the problem is when you do the root canal procedure, you absolutely devitalize the tooth. In other words, you kill the tooth. You no longer have a blood supply to the tooth. So the tooth cannot use the body's own defenses, its white blood cells and antibodies and so forth, to keep it clean and to protect the body. It simply incubates the bacteria, and then they and their toxins can spread systemically.
Dr. Nunnally, do you, in the film Root Cause, there was they were talking about root causes and breast cancer, there being potential link there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's been noted by physicians around the world, particularly integrative physicians who have been treating patients for so long. Those who have kept records many times have seen this link between a root canal treated tooth and breast cancer on the same side. I can't speak to it other than that, because typically those are patients who are coming to me. I'm obviously not treating them for their breast cancer, but I certainly have been exposed to many physicians from all over the globe who have talked to me about this and have noted that particular relation. I will say that many cancer patients come to us, and many of them have teeth on that same side. It sort of makes sense, Heidi, because those teeth, especially on those particular meridians that are associated with the breast, drain right down into that area, into that same lymph tissue. So I'm not honestly at liberty to say I know for sure that's a cause, but I can tell you that there are many physicians around the world who think there is.
And I think that that's why Root Cause was banned so fast. They took it down, is what I think anyway. It's an amazing movie. People do please try and watch that. It's very, very important. Dr. Nunnally, some last words of advice to our amazing audience.
Well, so often I'm asked, if you could just give me one tip, what would it be to improve my oral health? And so the one tip that I would give your audience today is get a water pick. I personally, believe me, I don't get a penny from Water Pick brand, but they have one called Ion, I-O-N. I've used many water picks. I love this little water pick. And so if you'll put an ounce of hydrogen peroxide in your water pick with 7 or 8 ounces of water and use that daily, especially before you go to bed, you will improve the microbiome and the health of your mouth tremendously. So if you did nothing else, I want you to still brush, but also the use of a water pick with a little hydrogen peroxide in it and the remaining water in the reservoir will be a tremendous help to you.
That's you know what? I'm going to go and get one straight away. Thank you so much for that advice.
You're welcome.
Heidi, it's so wonderful to see you back and you're smiling and glowing, and we're so thrilled for you. And Dr. Nunnally, there are no words to thank you, as always. I mean, I can't think of an excuse to come to you because you fixed all my teeth, but I would be there in a second. As I say, people, it is an experience like you would never know before. So yeah, let's make sure everybody knows healthysmilesforlife.com is where you go to check that out. And Dr. Nunnally, thank you. Heidi, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And now over to Dawn.
Hello, my name is Dawn Richardson, and welcome to Advocacy Lifeline. You're live here on CHD TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of this show is to help empower you, our viewers, to be able to use your voice to affect change in law, policy, and public opinion through education and action for issues that are important to you and your family. Nothing what I'm about to talk about today should be construed as medical or legal advice, and these views are my own and not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense or the National Vaccine Information Center, where I work full-time as the Director of Advocacy. Today, we are going to be talking about how Florida's progress towards medical freedom exposes vaccine lies. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the Florida legislature has seen numerous bills filed to prohibit vaccine status discrimination and eliminate vaccine mandates. The idea of removing vaccine mandates picked up steam in September of 2025 when Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo announced at a September 3rd press conference in Hillsborough County Florida's plan to eliminate vaccine mandates. In this speech, he counters the notion that everyone has to take a vaccine for the benefit of those who can't take them. He says there's no ethical reason to take away your choice for you or your child. He brought up the coercion that happened during the COVID-19 and that enslaving people in terrible philosophies and taking away their freedoms is not the answer. He says we have to find better ways. He explained that the Florida Department of Health has the ability to start the process of removing some of those mandates that the health department issues, and then he would be working with Governor DeSantis and the legislators to remove the rest of the mandates. The first part of this plan is well on its way. On Friday, December 12th, 2025, in the Panama City Beach, Florida Health Department held an administrative code workshop where they were presenting this idea of removing the chickenpox, hepatitis B, Hib, and pneumococcal vaccine mandates, because that's what's done through the rule. They took oral public comments, and there were a lot of people that testified and showed up. It was a lively debate, and right now we're waiting on this change to be adopted, and we're very optimistic that that's going to happen. Another step that Florida took was they created the Make America Healthy Again Commission, the MAHA Commission, where the principles include individual medical freedom, informed consent, parental rights, and market innovation. First Lady Casey DeSantis is the chair of the Florida MAHA. She and Surgeon General Ladapo, who is also on the commission, held a roundtable with moms on medical freedom and Healthy Florida First on Friday, January 30th. I'd like to share with you some of what she had to say about the importance of informed consent to vaccination and no coercion.
As a mother, and surrounded with my fellow mothers and father, I know that parents are constantly navigating decisions about their children's well-being and their health. And those decisions must be guided by truth, by data, by the evidence, and not coercion. Parents deserve accurate, complete information about the benefits, the risks, implications, the data, or the lack thereof when it comes to vaccines. They should be empowered to make informed decisions about their children's well-being without fear of discrimination. No parent should lose their pediatrician. No family should ever be dropped from care. And no parent should be judged or excluded because of their vaccine choices. And unfortunately, that is what we are seeing across the state of Florida. I'm joined by some moms who are going to tell their stories, and I also have several letters from moms who have given this to us saying that they have lost their opportunity to be seen by a pediatrician because of their vaccine choices. Transparency and honesty builds trust, and informed consent is not optional, it is essential. Parents should be empowered with the truth to make informed decisions, because when they are given the evidence, the data, not partial answers, not pressure, they can make the best informed decisions for their children.
Let's fast forward to the start of this legislative session. Many of us in this movement worked really hard on writing and promoting draft legislation to remove and prohibit vaccine mandates. I'm not going to lie that we were frustrated that a bill to implement this vision of Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo and Governor Ron DeSantis was not filed in spite of commitments from legislators to do so. Nevertheless, some bills were filed that would still make meaningful contributions towards the eventual goal of legislatively removing the rest of the childhood vaccine mandates not covered by administrative rule. One bill, SB 1756, dubbed the Medical Freedom Bill in its documentation, offers common sense but important requirements for informed consent to vaccination, and it simplifies and expands the vaccine exemption process for families wanting to exercise their legal right to a vaccine exemption. This bill so far has passed both the Senate Health and Appropriations Committees. It is now in the Senate Rules Committee and moving forward. I'd like to cover a little bit more detail about the three main areas SB 1756 covers. The bill requires vaccine administrators to do three things: provide a child's parent or legal guardian with information about the risks, benefits, safety, and efficacy of each vaccine being administered using materials approved by state medical boards. Also, they have to obtain a signature from the child's parent or legal guardian acknowledging the receipt of this information. And finally, they need to inform parents of their options regarding the timing of multiple vaccinations for their children, and the bill authorizes them to comply with parents' requests. The second area that the bill covers, it expands existing vaccine exemptions to include a conscientious exemption, and it simplifies the vaccine exemption process for religious and conscientious exemptions. We're on number 2. If you can advance to the next slide, please. Okay, great. For religious and conscientious exemptions, where the exemption form will be obtained online from the Department of Health website. I'll have our guest later explain what parents have to do now instead and how this is a big improvement. But the third thing that the bill does is it allows pharmacists to provide ivermectin behind the counter to an adult without a prescription until the FDA approves it as an over-the-counter drug. It was from the time the health department meeting back in December, just through the most recent Senate appropriations hearing on Senate Bill 1756 just yesterday, when we've been hearing about and even witnessing the heavy pharma and medical trade lobbying that was happening in the Capitol in Tallahassee to try and stop these efforts, especially with this bill. I've been paying close attention to the misinformation and outright lies being propagated by those whose power, positions, or profits are intimately tied to vaccine mandates. But before we get into these details, I would like to bring on a special guest on our show today, Susan Sweetin.
Thanks for having me, Dawn.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, Susan, she's a mom of a vaccine-injured child, and she's a health freedom activist. She testified in favor of Senate Bill 1756 just yesterday morning up in Tallahassee. She had to make the trek all the way home, so we're really grateful that you were able to take some time to be with us today. Susan, she founded and runs the Freedom Travel Alliance, and she is the Chief Marketing Officer at the National Vaccine Information Center, where I also work. Susan, I'm so grateful that you're here. Can you please explain to our listeners how you got involved with these issues?
Sure, I'm happy to. My son was born healthy and beautiful, 5 hours old. He was I was asked to give him a hepatitis vaccine, the hepatitis B vaccine birth dose. And I didn't know what I know now, that it's unnecessary. And I was told by the nurse when I asked for a little bit more information, I started to look at it on my phone, that if I didn't give my son the vaccine, his pediatrician wouldn't see him the next day, and I wouldn't know if he was deaf, dumb, or blind. And that sent me into a tailspin of looking, instead of what was going on in this vaccine, what does it look like to have a newborn, and what are the symptoms or signs of a child that is might be deaf, dumb, or blind? And I happily handed my son over to the nurse for her to take him to do that and wash him and bathe him, because we had, instead of a golden hour, we had 5 hours of him, untouched and beautiful. And when he came back, I had realized I'd spent so much time on my phone that I didn't ever get out of the bed. And that was, after birth, I was like, let me readjust. And when I did that, I looked down. He was swaddled in the bassinet, and he had turned purple. And I screamed, called for the nurse, hit the call bell, and because he wasn't breathing. And she came in as I was unswallowing him, about putting him onto my chest, and smacked his back, and he started crying. And I'm from New Jersey, so I got really loud and aggressive. And I said some things that were along the lines of, what did you give my son? Because he was fine. And she told me to slow down. It was from a fast birth. And that woke me up to what my mom's intuition was telling me versus what I was being told by a nurse or a provider. We had that issue with him of him not breathing and stopping breathing every time he was horizontal sleeping. So I just stopped doing that. I just held him up for the first 9 months of his life, because that, what they called a fast birth issue, was happening for 9 months of his life, where I could not put him down without him not breathing. Finally found a integrative pediatrician that showed me the vaccine insert, where apnea is listed as a common side effect to the Hep B. And we went through the steps of what does it look like to detox and help heal him from this issue, which I'm lucky to say he is now 9, and he is in therapy 4 times a week for neurological tics, eye therapy for ocular problems, for reading and tracking, auditory processing issues, and brought me into the medical freedom space right after that, where I got connected to a great group of moms. This is one of the things about censorship is a problem, because if I hadn't found those moms that led me to pediatricians that I did connect with, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with the answers that I have on how to help and heal my son. So my work with NVIC was amazing. They were the first ones to let me know that I had 3 years to file a VAERS report. And Teddy, my son, was about 2.5 when I found that out. So I did file my VAERS report with a nurse advocate from NVIC, and have worked really hard to stay active to protect my son from laws, mandates, and any type of rules that come out on a statewide basis, countywide basis, school basis, and travel basis.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I know it's always hard to go back, and like every time you have to share that story, it's reliving it over again, and it brings it up. But I think it gives our listeners some context of the seriousness of this issue and how it can affect lives. So if you could just share, what would the passage of SB 1756 mean to you and your family?
I think the reason why it's so important to have expanded exemptions versus if you can't get a bill passed that would remove the mandates, which is all of our ultimate goal, is have bodily autonomy, is that not everyone holds a religious belief against vaccinations. I've woken up to my faith after my son. I saw him as a gift from God. But for those that just know in their hearts and in their conscience that that's not something that they want to explore for their children, they should have that same right without having to lie. And sadly, the system is set up where you have to go against your conscience if you don't have a exemption listed of philosophical or conscientious belief in your state. And that goes against the entire principle of what a religious exemption means. So I feel like families should have the ability to walk back a decision that's feels like it's being forced upon you for your child to attend school. And this is one of those avenues that we should all support.
I'd like to talk about the refutable opposition that we observed at this hearing and how it showcases the desperation of the dying paradigm of forced vaccination and vaccine mandates. We heard more than once how this bill would increase exemptions and threaten herd immunity. I loved how your testimony shot a hole right through this. Can you please share with everyone what you explained to the committee?
Well, I'm just going to give a hat tip to you, Dawn, because having you on speed dial always helps before we have a meeting and a hearing like this. And when we were discussing the fact that we were going to be outnumbered in the room of 100 people, there were 15 health freedom advocates sitting there. And the immune compromised, of course, came up to the microphone to tell everyone how my unvaccinated child would threaten their life. And they were in a room full of incomplete adults on their vaccine schedule. And that's what I walked them through. I said, if we look and compare the adults sitting in this room to the childhood vaccination immunization schedule, we'd all be seen as incomplete. And so they're talking about a threat of children, and yet they brought their children, their immune compromised children, into a room full of quote unquote unvaccinated children, adults. And that was something that they all took a pause and realized that yeah, none of them have gotten an updated MMR, varicella, pertussis vaccine, and they're worried about the children that weren't in the room, my unvaccinated child and the advocates sitting with me, and yet they're sitting right there, breathing the same air, shaking hands. The building was open, schools are open, tourism is happening, and they had to take a minute and acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's great. Just the light bulb going off. Hey, there are a lot more adults out there that are not up to date with the childhood schedule than there are children who are taking exemptions. And a lot of exemptions that children take are not even where they're completely unvaccinated. They're taking it for certain vaccines. So it's just absolutely ridiculous, that argument. It was also claimed, though, that informed consent to vaccination would cause less people to vaccinate, which is kind of funny. Like, if you know, then you wouldn't do it, so that's what they're arguing. If you know what the problems are, you might not do it. And this would cause measles to spread and children could die. That was invoked a number of times. I just want to cover some stuff. That the MMR vaccine cannot be credited with lowering measles deaths in the United States. I've got a chart here that shows in the modern era, it's rare to suffer permanent disability or death from measles in the United States. And if you look at this chart, the measles deaths declined 98% from the 1900s to 1963 before the measles vaccine was even introduced. And this was due mainly to advancements in living conditions, nutrition, and healthcare. On the other hand, vaccine injury is real. A search of the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System data found that as of January 30th, 2026, there were 17,830 adverse vaccine reactions where there was a measles vaccine administered, and of which of these over 11,746 of them were classified as serious or the person died. What's being ignored by those wanting to blame measles outbreaks on those using exemptions is that being vaccinated doesn't guarantee immunity. The vaccine is not 100% effective for the people who receive it, and vaccine immunity estimates don't take into account that there are decreases in immunity over time. There also have been measles outbreaks among highly vaccinated children. We've even seen some studies say where the population would be 100% vaccinated and there were still measles outbreaks. And additionally, vaccine immunity from measles wanes significantly. So there's no validity to placing the blame on those with exemptions for measles outbreaks. Physicians for Informed Consent has a great resource showing waning immunity from the MMR vaccine. By age 7, about 35% of vaccinated 7-year-olds are susceptible to subclinical infection with the measles virus. Subclinical means you wouldn't be diagnosed based on your symptoms. So most people wouldn't even know that they had contracted and were expressing a measles infection. And about 60% of vaccinated 15-year-old children are susceptible to subclinical infection with the measles virus. And by the time an adult is around 24 to 26, a projected 33% of vaccinated adults at that age are susceptible to actually a full-blown clinical infection. And consequently, nearly 50% of school children and most adults vaccinated with the MMR vaccine can still be infected with the measles virus, spread it to others, even with mild or no symptoms of their own. That is so important. And just gotta say, the MMR vaccine is not capable of producing herd immunity. So Susan, I want to, because this is really important, and we've heard this over and over again. Let's talk about the immune compromised. There was a senator asking the bill sponsor what he would tell a parent of a child with a medical exemption about their right to safely attend school, and a parent who is a doctor and had a child who went through chemo for leukemia. And they said they relied on others vaccinating to keep her daughter safe. Susan, how would you respond to that?
My answer is, when your child is sick, do you send them to school? When your child is unwell, do you bring them to the mall or to a grocery store? And if they are diagnosed with an illness or disease, an infection, would you invite a party to your house? Likely no. So this idea that the immunized, the compromised, are attending school where they can get hand, foot, and mouth, because there's no vaccine for that, where you can get pink eye. But it's my child that's unvaccinated that is the real risk to them, means that your child's life is more important than mine. My son suffered a vaccine reaction and will likely have another, if not worse, outcome if he was subjected to vaccinate to keep your child protected. And that leans on this group think of one is worth the risk over the many. But when it's your child, which in this case, it's my child, I will not, there's a phrase that we use consistently in the health freedom movement. I will not set my child on fire to keep yours warm. And that's how I see this. And the conversation really needs to be, what does that parent allow for the child of an immunized, compromised child, allow for them to attend a school where there is multiple things out there, not just your vaccine strains, diseases and infections, the cold, the flu, all of those things could be detrimental to a child at risk. And you're not putting your child in those situations when they're that ill. So the idea that their one child is going to be in that classroom, that there's one immunized, compromised child in every single classroom, means that all the other children need to take that risk, is off balanced. And in my mind, when my child's not well, I don't bring him out. So now you're talking about these children that are severely either in chemo, as the one parent mentioned, actively seeking treatment for a disease. You're not likely to bring them around other people where they can't even catch a common cold. because it could hurt them so
One
badly.
trip to a water fountain, touching that thing or to the bathroom could put that child at risk of an infection. And it's not our responsibility as parents to put our children at risk for a vaccine reaction because a pharmaceutical company didn't make the vaccine to work for everyone safely or effectively. That doesn't even make sense. And just like you said, a child at risk for a vaccine reaction has a life worth as much as a child with cancer. This premise that values one life over another because pharma failed has to be rejected. We have to stand up against that.
And we have to stop pitting each other against that. That was what I did speak about because it felt as if they paraded and used the children that were immunized compromised to have this conversation. And I didn't bring my son into that room. I didn't bring him to the hearing because I wasn't going to victimize him for a legislative play. I wouldn't do that. I said we should not be pitting the unvaccinated versus the immunized compromised. Both parties need to be addressed and protected.
What's the deal with these white coats at the hearing, like wearing your coat, your doctor coat, because you have to have your costume on? Like, what's the deal with that? You saw a lot of white coats there.
Yeah, so of 100 people, I would say 90% of them were in their lab coat, which is wild because when you go see them in their private practice, they don't even wear it. But it was it was the sign of solidarity, and I
Yeah.
think that most people call a white coat syndrome. There's an actual term, listed, if you look that up. So I think the idea was intimidation,
Yeah.
to believe the doctor, don't believe the mother.
hmm Yes. One senator claimed that the process for getting an exemption is so easy right now, and she was inferring that the bill was not necessary. Is that true? And what does a parent have to do now to get the exemption form?
Yeah, so you have to contact your county health department. So you have to find where your county health department is. Then you have to contact them. You have to make an appointment. You have to go down and see the nurse, and you have to fill in and talk to them while you're trying to assert your right to religious freedom. It's not as simple as um, saying, I'm opting out. You have to make an effort and be ready to stand in front of a health department nurse that is most of the time up against your belief system. And that intimidation has to be done every year. This is not like a one and done, you have it forever. You and your child need to go down to your local Department of Health and stand in front of a nurse that disagrees with you likely and explain every year how you're using and asserting your religious exemption.
So just
Not
having
simple.
this form online is going to be a game changer. And this also uses that coercion or intimidation factor so that they really want to bully parents into not doing this. They're counting on some parents not doing it because they don't want that confrontation, and it's just easier to go get vaccinated. That is not informed consent, and that's why this bill will help for sure. And with today's technology, why would we have a form that you have to go down and pick up? If you can you can get your fishing license online, you don't have to go show up and explain why you like fishing. That's like how well, or hunting, how well would that go over in Florida? So anyway, one person testified against the bill, and they talked about a bad outcome in an adult from a bacterial meningitis infection. She said we don't need to be increasing our exemptions. And this was just ridiculous because the bill only applies to childhood vaccine exemptions, and there are no bacterial meningitis vaccine mandates in Florida for children to be exempt from anyway. So even if childhood exemptions increased, it would have no bearing on bacterial meningitis. The only mandate that Florida has right now is for colleges, for kids in dorm rooms. And what's so funny is all they have to do is sign a simple waiver and they can get that right from the school right then and there. And this is a far easier process than the exemption process is now for children. And then one doctor went ahead and explained, they claimed that expanding exemptions will take away the freedom of families in favor of vaccines. You've already kind of covered this, and this really makes no sense, especially when there's a risk of injury or death from a vaccine. So they want everyone else to vaccinate. So their vaccine that doesn't work for them, and they're still protected by others vaccinated with a vaccine that doesn't work for anyone. That is just crazy. Absolutely insane logic.
I will say that talking about the woman that came up to and flown in, by the way, because she's not a Florida resident, to come in and talk to the legislators about her injury, and unfortunately she did suffer an injury, but she suffered an injury, and I do want to highlight this to everybody. While she was pushing for the meningitis vaccine, she suffered an injury that is from the meningococcemia. And meningococcemia is not what the vaccine is advertised to prevent. So that's really important for everyone that's listening to understand. While yes, it's very sad that she was injured by this bacteria, the vaccine wouldn't have protected her anyway. The meningococcal vaccine, it's not recommended anymore, and so those are things that get tripped up in the circus and the theatrics of what the pharmaceutical companies bring into these hearings to showcase their desperate desire to vaccinate the entire population. And the concept and the line of questioning or pushback that the legislator of our bill was getting regarding that a conscientious exemption would no longer protect those that are getting vaccinated and want everyone to be vaccinated it's just there's a lost trail, because right now vaccines are mandated in the state of Florida. So they have their freedom under the duress of mine. That whole idea that a conscientious exemption would end their freedom when they are protected under the law of a mandate.
Yep. Just can't even
non-starter.
I know. Well, let's talk about this bizarre opposition from the group called American Families for Vaccines. And just so our viewers have some context, we have a snapshot of the partners they list on their website. You've got the American Academy of Pediatrics, a bunch of vaccine manufacturers, and no shortage of organizations that have lobbied in other states to remove vaccine exemptions. But look at that little red button at the bottom where it says, view our statement of independence. And all I have to say about this is, you know what they say about people who lie down with dogs? They get fleas. This is not an above board organization that's here to protect children's health. Susan, let's talk about this bizarre economic analysis. I would love for you to shed some light on this. And if we could bring up that analysis so everyone can see. All right, Susan, tell me about this.
I mean, it's pie in the sky. They were saying $9 billion loss over GDP over 10 years if a conscientious exemption is added. That's what that's going to do to the state of Florida. 1.3 billion in annual tourism. People are going to stop coming to Florida, which I can tell you, we're in peak season. That's not true. We see a loss of 1.3 billion annual tourism dollars lost. And this idea that we're going to see household earnings 2.7, because people are going to have to go to the doctor all the time, take time out of their jobs because now they're so sick because the conscientious exemption has increased a massive polio outbreak. It's just phenomenal the way that they can manipulate data into a narrative of a storyline that will help promote fear. None of this, as you showed, was done in a vacuum. It was done with partners that benefit from the sale of vaccinations.
Yeah.
And so the study itself was skewed from the jump. And they promoted it as because yesterday's meeting was appropriations. So they tried to show the impact that this conscientious bill would have on the state. And we were lucky enough to see that poster, that flyer that came out on their social media, and use it to dissect the study that they're really promoting, and give some of our senators a heads up, to ask the hard questions that we knew in our statements we wouldn't get to ask. And I'm so glad one of them took us up on that offer.
Right. Senator Erin Grall, she ripped the validity of the study to shreds. Let's watch what she had to say about it.
Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. I was able to review the report that was referenced today by a number of speakers, and I just, I'm not an economist, but I have deposed quite a few in my career, and this is built upon assumption upon assumption. Going so far as in the tourism impact section, we're talking about SARS, COVID, and Zika and outbreaks and what those have done to a few communities, when those in fact aren't even part of the childhood vaccine schedule, and wouldn't have impacted tourism in any way, shape, or form. The best part of the report, though, is the acknowledged limitations. The documentation transparently notes several simplifications, treating the susceptible population as equivalent to unvaccinated kindergartners, assuming closed population dynamics despite adding imported cases, and using fixed epidemiological parameters that may vary in reality and projecting vaccination trends linearly from recent history. The Poisson distribution for imported cases introduces inherent randomness into projections. This methodology represents a reasonable epidemiological projection for policy planning, balancing model complexity with data availability. In plain English, this is not proven and reliable and would not be permitted into a court of law to prove the assumptions and allegations in here, but it has been paid for to influence our policy today, and I think we should reject it.
That's so fantastic. That was great. Glad she got a chance, and I'm glad y'all were able to get a hold of that, and so that she could be prepared with this. I just want to say I have a little experience in this area. I worked for 7 years in the late 1990s to 2003 to pass a conscientious exemption in the state of Texas. And I want to say that adding the conscientious exemption had no negative effect on the Texas economy. Texas added this conscientious exemption in 2003, and they actually went ahead and made the forms available online this year in 2025. The Texas economy is soaring. It's more than double the gross state product in that time period from 2003 till 2024. It is the second largest economy in the U.S., and Texas leads the nation in job creation and business expansions, regardless of the addition of the conscientious exemption 23 years ago. And I just want to say this one thing, because it cracks people up when they hear this, but it just shows how they're making a mountain out of a molehill. Even though there was a measles outbreak in Texas at the beginning of the 2025 legislative session, the Texas legislature still passed a bill into law making the exemption forms available online, because it was the right thing to do and to make them easier for parents to get and less expensive for the state to handle. And they even passed another bill expanding liability for vaccine manufacturers during an active measles outbreak. So, Susan, where is this bill, and what should people do next?
Right. I think what's important for everyone to remember is that I'm just a mom, and this was my second time at the Capitol. And we need everyone to stay vigilant and stay alert, whether that's through email, through calls, or if you can attend a hearing in person. Right now, it looks like this bill is headed to the Rules Committee next week. So if you can attend in Tallahassee, please do. And then the second piece that we need everyone to do is find out who your House representative is and put pressure on them to get our bill on the matching bill of this inside the House and up in rules. And so we can create a pathway for this conscientious exemption to become law. So next week, Tallahassee, put pressure on your House reps to encourage them to have the ability to say, this is the state of freedom. we're leading the nation. And in order to keep pushing forward on what Freedom Florida means, we need a conscientious exemption, that expansion listed inside of the legislative rules.
That's great. And don't forget, people, you want to contact your senator too, because after it comes out of rules, it goes to the Senate floor and has a vote there. But you don't have to remember all this. The beauty is about what I do in my real job. We have the bill posted on the NVIC advocacy portal at nvicadvocacy.org. Just go to your Florida state page and it's there with all this information, where it's going, who you need to talk to. And the beauty is when you're logged into the portal, if you scroll down below the action alert or below the bill posting, you can see who your rep and senator are. We figure it out for you. You click on their names, you get all their contact info, and you can contact them. So please contact your rep and senator. And if you're absolutely terrified and don't want to testify in person, show up anyway to show support. Sign a card in favor of the bill, but saying you don't want to testify. And those cards, everybody's name's read off, and it makes a difference, seeing that there are people that took their time to come there and fill out a card, So anyway, Susan, I'm so grateful that you're on today. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I think I just want to say we're in a really special time right now where the country is looking at health and wellness in a way that they've never have before. This is our moment to be loud and to be proud, and that means sharing, liking, and really getting active in your local legislation. We have a momentum built behind the federal government, but it takes local action to make a federal impact. And that doesn't always mean that you have to show up at your capital, but it does mean that you need to get your voices heard in your local legislative House or Senate, letting your county commissioners know and letting your church know. This is the time that we should not be hiding behind keyboards. We need to be active in our legislation, knowing that we have a full support of the federal government behind us.
I'm so grateful again for you coming on today. Thank you so much, Susan. And we will be tracking this bill and where it goes. And, we may have to have you back on shortly. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
So I just want to kind of recap everything, why this bill should be supported. It does increase informed consent to vaccination. It simplifies the process of using vaccine exemptions that are already authorized by state law. Currently, families have to want an exemption. They have to go down to their local health department, obtain the form, and they often have to endure being lectured about vaccines and questioned about their faith before the form will be given to them. This bill saves the parent and the local health departments time and money. Vaccine exemptions are already available by law, and there shouldn't be bureaucratic hurdles or intimidation tactics in the way of parents utilizing them. You can help by please sharing this show with others, especially legislators, staffers, and families in Florida. On the CHD TV website under shows, pick Advocacy Lifeline. You can copy the link to this week's show and share it. Also, please consider donations to CHD and NVIC so we can keep up this important work. Special thank you to all of you, all of our listeners on the show. I'm grateful for all of you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks on Wednesday morning, March 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and 7 a.m. Pacific Time. God bless you all. God bless America. See you next time.
Okay.
We are live. Okay, tell us your name.
My name is Suzette Loy.
And you are?
Kehlani Loy.
And how old are you?
I'm 12.
But this story isn't about you too much. It's not about a vaccine injury. Go ahead.
It's about vaccine mandates and how California segregated our children because of our medical choices. And so there's a lot of families in California that were forced to homeschool when it was never part of our educational plan. I have a huge problem with California legislators saying, oh, it's no big deal, just go ahead and homeschool, and it's not the easiest thing to do. When I heard that they were passing this, I fought like crazy. I went to court. We tried to file an injunction against it. Obviously, we failed. We drove all the way up to the Capitol, 9 hours with my children, came back, thought that our voices would be heard, and they weren't. I had to shut my business down to homeschool my kids. I worked my tail off to build that business up, and I passed out all my clients like Halloween candy. And so now I've just been working on homeschooling, and I'm doing the best that I can with them. I'm trying to build community. I created Bloom Homeschool Support, and so it's just like a website with a hub of events, because I feel like since I'm forced to homeschool, I have to make it amazing for my children so that they don't look on the other side of the fence wanting to be there, because California completely segregated them and they're discriminated against.
So when did you leave school? How long ago?
Like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you find homeschooling?
I like it a lot.
Well, good job, Mum.
Thanks. I try.
And your brother?
I think he likes it. It's fun.
And why is it fun?
I feel like we learn more than we do in public school.
Yeah, we set up a lot of field trips. They do a lot of educational experiences, so they connect that way. I make sure that they volunteer out in the community. So they're doing a lot of good things, but this wasn't part of our educational plan. And luckily I have a husband who is really supportive, and he works full time. But I really feel for the parents that are separated, and they're working full time, and they're struggling with homeschooling, but they can't leave the state because their significant other or their ex, their spouse, won't allow them to leave the state with their child. So those families are really stuck, and there's a lot of those families out there.
And a lot of parents just giving up and getting their child caught up on loads of vaccinations.
Oh, there's so many that just did it up against their will, that just bawled while they were holding their children and getting the injections, just so that they could work and, kind of use school as like a sitter, so that they could put a roof over their head and food on their table. And even though that wasn't something that they wanted to do, and they completely risked injury.
But you've only had one shot, haven't you? And your brother's had none at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what made you wake up to stop the vaccines with her?
So I wanted to wait until they hit all of their milestones. I have older children, and I suspect that for one of my daughters, that the vaccine had a role in some issues that she had in her health. So there's a 14-year difference. So when I had Kaylani, I had decided, I'm not going to vaccinate right now. I'm going to wait until she hits all of her milestones. I want to make sure that she can walk. I want to make sure she can make eye contact, she can communicate with me, and that she has her balance. I want to make sure everything is good to go before I start vaccinating. And when I do, I'm going to research which ones you can combine together or which ones shouldn't be, and I'm going to go ahead and spread it apart. And if there's a reaction, then we're going to stop. So then I heard this little rumor on Facebook that, California isn't going to allow your children to go to school if they're not vaccinated. And I thought that was just something lame that someone had made up, and they're just trying to ruffle some feathers. So she's 5 years old. I go to sign her up for school, and they denied her school entry. The nurse came to talk to me and said that her vaccination record needed to be filled before she had school entry. So then that's when I found out that it was actually real. So then I spoke with the district nurse, and the district nurse and I, we sat down and said, this is ridiculous. We're American citizens. We're tax-paying residents, and this is a school that's within her district, so she should have a right to go to school there. So they told me to, if I figured out a schedule and if I had a doctor sign off on it, then they would go ahead and they would allow her in. So for 3 weeks, I totally researched, I dove in, and I stretched it all out. And the amount of vaccines that they wanted her to have, it was going to take 2 years for her to fully get caught up on what I was kind of willing to do just to get her into school. So I went to Kaiser, and I went to the doctor, and I asked him if he could sign it. He said I was completely ridiculous. He said in front of my children that I was trying to kill them and that I didn't love them. It was just, it was, I have so many stories about doctors and the way that they treat you behind doors once they find out that you're not going to vaccinate. So once he said that, I said, okay, look, I have my daughter's best interests at heart. You're supposed to advocate for her also because you're a pediatrician. So let's work together. And if you could sign this, this is the sheet that I have, and this is what I'm going to agree to catch her up to schedule so that she can go to school. How can you not sign this and deny this perfectly healthy child her education? So I said, what would you suggest? You see what I'm willing to do. You let me know what you would suggest. And he said, just give them all to her, and like shrugged his shoulders. And I said, what do you mean all of them? So if I say yes right now, how many vials are you going to come in here? Like how many shots do you want to give my child, my 5-year-old daughter, at one time? And he said, all of them. So I said, okay, we're going to go through that. And so I counted and I said, 16. If I say yes, you're going to go outside and your nurse is going to get 16 shots ready for my healthy child right now in one shot, and you're totally fine with that. And he said, yeah. And so then I said, our conversation's finished. And so that's when I started fighting.
That doctor is unbelievable.
Uh-huh. I had another doctor tell me that he said, do you question an airplane every time you get on a plane? And I said, no, I would hope that they've already done the walkthrough with everything, but are you comparing my child to an airplane? And he goes, well, sometimes you just, get on the plane and you just trust that it's good. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that with my kids. So
how do you feel? What do you think about vaccines? Are you glad that your mum did this for you?
Yeah.
Are you healthy?
Yes.
You look very healthy. Your eyes are bright and glowing. You look great. What kind of things do you like to do? What's your love?
I like to play violin, listen to music, and do arts and crafts and stuff like that.
Nice.
she's a chef. She loves to cook.
Oh yeah, I also love to cook.
Oh yeah.
So what's your message to the people? What would you like to say to them?
So first off, for the parents, especially the ones out in California, don't let anybody, legislation, pediatricians, any of them, don't let them force you to do anything that's against your will. You are your child's best advocate. You have a whole entire community here in California. There's a lot of us. It's not just you. You're not alone. They'll make you feel like you're alone. They'll make you feel like you're an awful parent, but you're not. You do what you need to do that's best for your child, and you have a ton of support. There's so many of us homeschoolers. I think just in San Diego County alone, there's probably about 10,000 families that are homeschooling. So you do what you need to do for your kids.
And just before we sign off, tell us a few of the dangerous things doctors say. We're making a compilation of them. What kind of things have doctors said to you about your unvaccinated kids?
Well, I actually haven't been to the doctors in a while. So I had one that was really, really nice. He was actually one of the nicest I've ever met. And then as soon as I denied, I think it was her 2-year-old shots, he went on his laptop, looked up a picture of his child, and he turned it to me and he said, "Do you want to kill her?"
What was he showing you?
A picture of his daughter. So why would I want to do that? And he goes, "Well, you're not getting your child vaccinated. So if they go to the park together and yours isn't vaccinated, she could kill my daughter." And I said, "Well, if yours is vaccinated, then she's probably protected."
What is wrong with these doctors?
So many, yeah. So it's gotten to a point to where, you just have to know what you're talking about in there, and you just kind of have to be prepared.
Dear God.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this story. Anything else you guys want to say?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
I mentioned
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.